So in this video, I'm gonna share with you how to choose the right New York City neighborhood for you. Now, I always say that the neighborhood that you choose to move to is actually more important than the actual apartment that you choose to live in when first moving to New York City. Now, I know that probably sounds like a crazy thing to say, and I know it also might be frustrating because you might be thinking, Lauren, I have like this dream apartment that I'm trying to achieve here, so I don't even want to think about anything that's more important than that. But hear me out. The reason why I think that the neighborhood is more important than the actual apartment, especially when first moving to New York City, is because you're not going to spend a lot of time in that apartment at first. You're going to be out exploring the city. And honestly, the only really exception to that is if you have a work from home job. And even then, there are other options for you. You can go to a co-working space, or a free option would be like you can go to, there's tons of coffee shops that people work at all day. So you're just not gonna spend a lot of time in your apartment. So I really do think that the actual neighborhood you choose is so much more important. Now you're probably thinking, okay, that's great, but at the same time, you're feeling really overwhelmed by what neighborhood you should actually live in. So without getting into too many details in this video, we all know that there's a huge difference from like uptown versus downtown, or midtown versus downtown, or midtown versus uptown, right? Huge differences between all these neighborhoods. But at the same time, you might have two people that live in the same exact neighborhood, yet one lives on this side of the neighborhood and the other one lives on the complete opposite side of the neighborhood. They could have two extremely different experiences while still living in the same neighborhood. So sometimes it's even more individually by what street you choose to live on or what part of the neighborhood you're in. New York City is just so nuanced like that. So the first thing that I can recommend when trying to figure out what neighborhood is right for you is to spend time in that neighborhood. So if you have a friend that lives in the neighborhood that you might be considering, if you can, stay with that friend in that neighborhood. Now, you might find that even though they love living in that neighborhood, that when you're with them a day or two, you might find like that you don't like the neighborhood at all. And you might literally feel like, wait, I don't get it. Like, what's all this hype about? That's completely okay. And honestly, I've felt like that before, so I 100% understand that feeling. At the same time, you might absolutely love a neighborhood once you spend some time with that friend in that neighborhood. Now, I do recommend staying in that neighborhood. If you don't know anyone who lives there, I guess the next best thing would be to book a hotel room or get an Airbnb. Now, I know that's also frustrating if you're trying to afford living in New York City for the first time. You're probably like, wait, Lauren, I don't have money for a hotel room or a really expensive Airbnb. Like, what am I supposed to do? So there's a few things that you can do. Now, there are a few times throughout the year that hotels tend to be cheaper than other times throughout the year. So there's actually this new like hotel week or hotel month, and it actually takes place right after New Year's. So the beginning of January, where they do discounted rates on hotels all around New York City. It's kind of similar to restaurant week, like the same idea except for hotels. So that's definitely an option to get a cheaper hotel room. Now, there's also an app called Hotel Tonight. It's in other areas outside of New York City, so you might have heard of it. And it basically focuses on getting you good rates for hotel rooms kind of last minute. So it might be a little hard if you're trying to plan well in advance, but if you do have some wiggle room, that's a really good way to get rates at pretty nice hotels. Now, you also might be thinking, wait, Lauren, so the neighborhood I want to live in potentially doesn't even have hotels, so what do I do now? So you can definitely try to stay in a neighboring neighborhood and just walk over, spend time in that neighborhood that you potentially would be living in and kind of experience it that way. And so if you can't do the hotel option or stay with a friend at all, the next best thing after that is at least spending time in that neighborhood, both during the day and at night, because it's very, 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 very important to see the neighborhood at all times of the day. There are some neighborhoods in New York City that are extremely lively at night and then completely dead during the day, and it's like a ghost town. Then there are neighborhoods that are the complete opposite. They're extremely lively during the day, and then at night, there's no one around. So you might be okay with either one of those, but at the same time, you just need to know the vibe of the neighborhood before you get there. You don't want to move into a random neighborhood, and then the first week that you're there in New York City, you're completely like shell-shocked because you just didn't expect the neighborhood to be how it is. I want you to be as prepared as possible when making this move to New York City. So, and honestly, this advice can even apply for people who are already in New York City. There are some people who kind of like fell into a neighborhood. They didn't really think much about it, or they had roommates that were just living in a neighborhood and they moved in with them. Like, they might have not put much thought into it. And even when you're considering a new neighborhood, this advice kind of applies to that as well. I guess except the hotel thing, because it might be a little weird to get a hotel room if you're already living in New York City. But at the same time, it could also be fun, kind of like a staycation. So might be a good idea. To sum up all this advice, I always suggest experiencing the neighborhood for yourself before moving there, especially if you're moving from a place where you have to fly to New York City and you can't come in and out easily by car or train, then you definitely need to spend some time being here beforehand if you can. And then if you really can't get to New York City before moving here, so I would definitely recommend looking up the neighborhood specifically on YouTube as much as you can. Now, some neighborhoods are covered a lot more than others on YouTube. Hopefully I will be changing that over the next year because I plan to have a lot more content specific on different neighborhoods all throughout Manhattan, and then also going into Brooklyn and then other boroughs as well. But I really think that you need to kind of experience it for yourself. There's nothing like it. And you can have two people in the same exact room. One person might love a neighborhood and the other person might despise it. So it's really all about preference. So just to share a little bit of a story with you on one of my neighborhood experiences is that, so a few years ago, I was moving to Tribeca from Midtown West. Now, Tribeca is, you might know a little bit about the vibe of Tribeca. Tribeca is a very glamorized neighborhood. It's also one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Manhattan. A lot of people would do anything to live in Tribeca, and I was one of those people. When I had the opportunity to move to a apartment in Tribeca, I was so thrilled. I couldn't wait. It was like a dream come true. Like, I couldn't believe that I was actually getting the opportunity to live in Tribeca one day. So I was so excited, and then I lived there for almost 2 years, and during that time period, I realized that I did not love Tribeca that much. To this day, I still spend a lot of time in Tribeca. I do shop there, dine there, go to bars there, but I just didn't love living there on a day-to-day basis. It just wasn't the right neighborhood for me. Even though almost my whole life I thought that Tribeca was like the dream neighborhood for me, sometimes it's a very different experience when you're actually there living it on a day-to-day basis. So don't be like me and learn the hard way. You might have to, because I do think that almost everybody does at some point. So if you really spend the time doing the research and experiencing it for yourself, it can really save you a lot of grief from having to go through not liking where you live, because nobody should have to go through that. But at the same time, I really do hope that this video helped you. I know I couldn't go into too many specifics about neighborhoods because that would be a very long video. But like I said, I will be producing a lot more content on different neighborhoods all around New York City very soon. So hopefully, if you're not in New York City by then, or if you still would love to see content that I have on different neighborhoods, that will be coming very soon.